And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Review Chat. This is your monthly discussion about the business, marketing, and science behind online reviews. I'm the host of Review Chat, and for this show, I'm talking with Michelle Steward and Jim Narus, both professors and researchers at Wake Forest University, and Ben Martin, executive director of the Review Society.
Thank you.
Hi there.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I have to say, almost no one out there walking around, at least in the United States today, can avoid the online review. You know, we use it for everything from choosing which restaurant, to go to on Yelp, to looking through the Amazon reviews to pick the best broom to buy. It's everywhere. But when we start looking at bigger purchases, when we start focusing on how businesses and the people responsible for making those purchases, those large purchases for businesses, how they make their decisions, that's when things can get really interesting. So let's set the foundation for people tuning in today who may not have thought very much about how these big buying decisions are made and their connection to online reviews. So Jim and Michelle, I'm actually going to start with you, but Ben, I know that you dig into all of this research too. So please jump in when it makes sense. All right.
Will do.
Okay. So Jim, Michelle, based on your research and I read through the papers, really, really interesting to dig into as much of it as possible. But first, I just want to ask you, how have things changed over the past 10 years in the way that the purchasers at organizations make their buying decisions?
Well, Jim and I are social scientists at heart, and we enjoy trying to understand why things work the way they work. So our research over the last 2.5 years is based on over 3,300 or so business-to-business decision makers who have participated in our research, from over 100 personal interviews with business-to-business decision makers and about 3,200 participants in over a dozen scenario-based experiments that we conducted. And all of these were geared to help us understand the influence of online tools, reviews in particular, in business-to-business decision making. And there were a couple of factors that probably drove this more than not, our interest in it. In part, we found that there really points of view about online technology that became more relevant because you could actually go online and offer comments about suppliers and look at that portfolio point of views. We also have the entrance of millennials into the workforce, which means we look at technology in our consumer lives and have those similar preferences in our professional life. Alongside of this is some data from the United States Department of Labor statistics. And this is, if you look at all management positions, purchasing professionals, those business-to-business decision makers, have among the slowest growth of new positions. That means there are fewer people having to make more decisions. So this opens up some opportunities to look at the power of online reviews in these very complex, high-stakes decisions.
One of the things I would add to this, and obviously you have the technology on one side, but the other aspect of this is that when you look at what we're buying these days, both in the consumer arena and the business-to-business arena, it's become more experiential. So you hear the word customer experience a lot. In B2B, when you say experiential, you're basically coming down to service, customer service, on-time delivery, technical support, new product development. And the thing that's difficult about evaluating an experiential service is that you can't look at the spec sheet. The best way to evaluate an experience is to talk to other people who have had that experience. So in regards to these online reviews, why are they becoming more important? Because when a purchasing manager wants to evaluate, they want to talk to others who have had that experience.
I love it. We're going to dig into that a lot more. I mean, that's the crux of what this is all about today. But I want to ask you about when you got into your research, when you started looking through some of this, because these changes are there, we have some ideas about why they happened. Was there anything that actually surprised you in what you found? You know, was there?
There were probably two surprises for us initially.
Mm-hmm.
And the surprises are on the foundation of there are two types of communities that we found that were very important. One, the online reviews from other decision makers from other companies. And then two, the internal community that provided online feedback through supplier scorecards, not just quantitative ratings, but also qualitative ratings that helped companies make decisions looking at supplier usage across geographies and across functional areas. But the surprise is first in the internal side that if an internal community, so groups of users within the company, had a positive experience with a supplier, the business-to-business decision maker did not stop there. The concern of positive internal reviews, if you will, was that they might not be fully evaluating the supplier. Maybe they had too cozy of personal relationships with the supplier. So purchasing professionals wanted some external validation that this supplier was as good as their people thought they were. And that was a little bit surprising. I think our initial idea was that business-to-business decision makers would go with who their user groups preferred, and that was not the case at all. The second surprise is in the area of negative online reviews. Negative online reviews are a fact of life. But what we found interesting was that negative reviews about a supplier were not deal breakers at all. And in fact, in many cases, it prompted the business-to-business decision maker to want to explore much further in that. And that was surprising to us as well.
That is interesting. I wonder why that is. So that is so fascinating. Now, Jim, I cut you off. I saw that you were about to say something. Am I right?
Well, you asked for surprises. Michelle and I are collecting data in China, India, Ireland, and the US. And I don't know if I would say disturbing thing that we've discovered is China is way ahead of the United States in the use of all of these digital tools in the B2B arena. So, for example, when it's time to evaluate a new product for purchase, a Chinese manager is most likely to go to one of these online communities or review sites to get guidance on it, as opposed to the US when in a lot of industries, they're slow to do that. So the point relative to that is that, hey, if we want to do business with China, if we want to compete with China, we better learn how to use these tools and start using them, or else we're going to be left in the dust.
Ben, I'm going to call on you because I feel like, you probably have a little bit to say. Does this reflect some of the things that you're finding when you look at this? You're with the Review Society, Executive Director of Review Society. And so I'm sure that you're digging into all of this as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things that Michelle pointed out was the impact of negative reviews. And, it's interesting that in some of the research that you'll read, it'll say, just a 1-star increase in your rating and this is typically in the B2C market, but just a 1-star increase in your rating can increase your sales. Something like, I think the study I read today was something between 9 and 14%. So I think there's this attitude amongst people who are involved with online reviews that moving the needle and getting even one negative review can be a deal breaker. But I think to Michelle's point, look, even though this research says that, having a 1-star increase in your review can lead to this increase in sales, there's also the flip side to that coin. If every review looks positive, then that looks like astroturfing, right? That looks like it's paid or incentivize people to give you positive reviews. And look, nobody has a 100% awesome experience with every organization every single time.
Right.
And I think the reality is, and as to Michelle's point is, when we look at the reality of anybody's experience, like nobody has 100% positive reviews every single time across the board, across every single customer. So having some mixed reviews in there is actually a benefit to anybody who's trying to sell.
There's nothing that I don't know, sets off alarm bells for me more when it comes to online reviews than when I look at something and it's like 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And it's a short thing. It's like, it was great or just always the best or something. And I'm like, no, when you know somebody really loves something or really hates something, they usually kind of expand on it and there's a lot more detail. So if I see too many of those piled up, I start to get worried. I want to actually go over and talk about Jed. Hi, Jed, who's on live right now. And thank you so much for joining us today. I love this guy, by the way. He is an amazing digital strategist and you need to follow him online if you're not. How much weight do people put on reviews when there are only a limited number of responses? I mean, I guess that goes to the quality of reviews and making sure that they actually, that they are reliable. So I'm not sure who to ask about that. Does anyone want to grab that?
Well, in relation to a couple of the issues that you've raised, one of the biggest concerns that purchasing people have, and it's probably more in the consumer arena, is the verifiability and the validity of the reviews. And the problem in the consumer arena is that, a lot of products and restaurants are being reviewed by college students in dormitories who've never been there. The difference in the B2B arena is that most of the platforms and the better sites verify that this is a legitimate person who has purchased this product recently and knows what it's about. So I think that the way the platforms get around this is to ensure that the people that are doing the reviews are legitimate. As far as the number of reviews, yes, absolutely, sample size makes a difference. So being an academic, I can give you a long talk about how large a sample size you need to have a reliable estimate. But you have to realize that in a lot of cases, there simply isn't a large sample size. So if you're talking about a new product, new supplier, new technology, there really aren't that many legitimate reviewers out there. So I would rather have a handful of reviews from people that have actually used it than to have some arbitrary number that I can reach. And I think the key point that you're making is that I think people discard the reviews that are one or two words. And if someone can get in there and provide some advice, some insight that, I read it and I say, yeah, this person actually bought that product, then I tend to believe it.
Well, and these business-to-business decision makers that Jim and I have been talking with and have been a part of our research, the one thing that became clear to us is they are really truth seekers. And it isn't necessarily they're just trying to validate whether a review is on the up and up, but they're trying to look at the experience a buyer had with a supplier. First, did that buyer have the same level of technological expertise, if it's a tech solution, as they do? What's the similarity between the two companies? They're also looking at, why did that buyer buy? Did they buy based on price? If they did, they wouldn't be surprised to see a review that was perhaps negative of a supplier on elements, that were about extreme service provision or something of the like. So this truth-seeking behavior, no one review or no collection of review is the end of the story for them. They're collecting a portfolio of points of view in order to make the best decision for their companies.
So one thing I would add to that is what I've seen in the research leads me to believe that there are 3 V's of reviews. So the first one is the volume of reviews, so the number of reviews that are there. And it's clear that when there's a higher volume of reviews, the company that's being reviewed or the product or the service that's being reviewed, the veracity of those reviews is deemed to be hold more weight because there are more reviews to rely upon. The other 2 V's are the validity of the review, which would mean that the source of the review is valid. The person who's giving the review has either bought or purchased that service or product or whatever it is that we're talking about. And then the last one is the valence of the review, which means what's the overall sentiment of the review? Is it a positive or a negative review? So, clearly the volume of the reviews is super important. One of the research pieces that I've read that says, especially among new entrants into a market, the number of reviews is maybe even just as important as the overall sentiment of the review, the volume of the reviews in total. So, for those of you who are running newer companies, newer entrants into a market, building up the number of reviews, the volume of reviews early on the research that I've read says that is critical.
I mean, that's fascinating stuff. And it's really actually important for us to understand this, because especially in B2B, some of these purchases, the purchasers are oftentimes on this is their job. They do a poor decision making job on this. They make a poor decision, and it could mean their job. They could be out of there. And so I guess one of my next questions, what are some of the common pitfalls that these purchasers face when they are making these buying decisions today? Where are the places where they can go wrong?
Let me just jump in with a couple of points. And Michelle and I look at two types of online reviews: the internal reviews that come from vendor scorecards, and then the external reviews that come from online communities. And what we find is that each one of them has a place. So for example, if a company has been buying a product from a vendor for 20 years, they buy it in huge volume, there's a tendency to believe the in-house reviews. On the other hand, as we know, in today's environment, there are a lot of new products, there's not a lot of new suppliers, there's a lot of new technologies. I can't turn to my internal people because they don't know. Right. So I have to look externally to find out, what's the experience with these people. So, I don't know if this is a pitfall or an issue, but it's knowing when to go internal versus going external. And one of the things that we found that favors the external is that, surprisingly, purchasing managers have a lot of doubt about their internal people. Mm-hmm. In that, the first thing that comes up is maverick spend and what I would call cronyism. I've dealt with this company and this person for years, and they take me out playing golf or dinner. And as a result, when I read the internal reviews, I tend to be somewhat skeptical. So, when I look externally, it tends to validate what I have heard. And surprisingly, a lot of times the purchasing people put more faith in the online outside company peer reviews than the internal ones.
Okay, so I want to bring in this comment from Jason. To Ben's point, we have a new product to market and want to ramp up reviews. So how can we approach this strategically, adding these without begging? So this actually, this goes to a business who's saying, okay, so we've got something we want to market and we need to get some more reviews, but we don't want to go around looking like, hey guys, please, 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 can you say something? And hopefully positive, So I don't know. Do you have advice for Jason?
Well, maybe let me ask Michelle. I'd love to hear your perspective on this as, somebody who understands the buyer's point of view. I mean, I have my own perspective from, the vendor's point of view, but I'd be interested from a purchaser's point of view. If I'm looking at a relatively new entrant, what would I be looking for in a review about a relatively new entrant to a market?
Good.
When Jim and I started this research, we did a lot of qualitative interviews, and we worked with the Institute for Supply Management, the ISM, through their trade association. And one of the things that quickly surfaced was the idea that purchasing professionals preferred to rely on their trade association forums to exchange information. Because they had this fear of the lurking salesperson, in the cyber shadows, that would pounce on them as soon as they saw any sort of interest, right? And so I think this is a very good question that Jason's asked about. I've got something new and I believe in it. It works well. We just don't have enough clients that have experienced it. And asking any client to review something is a time-intensive process.
Yeah.
One of the points that we have made again and again in our research is that to review authentically a supplier benefits everyone. It benefits the supplier to improve, and it certainly benefits the buying firms in these areas. And I don't know that it's what can we do to increase the number of reviews as much as how can we facilitate spaces for buyers to speak comfortably about their experience without being afraid that salesperson's going to call them that afternoon afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would add, to Jason's point directly on, if I'm a relatively new entrant to a market, how would I approach my own clients and ask them to give reviews? So, the first one would be to have a message like this, which is, hey, we appreciate you putting your faith in us early on. We have an unproven model here, basically, and you've taken a leap of faith to basically acquire our product or make use of our product early on. And as an early adopter, as I get more clients, I will be able to serve you better because I'm going to be able to scale better. I'm going to have more sources to. And this especially goes for Jason's market where, he's working in software, right? So every new release, I can provide you with more features and functionality that are going to serve you better. Mm-hmm. So, one way that you can help me get more customers and to help you is if you will give me a review on whatever site we're looking at. So, making an ask in those kinds of terms is to say you'll be helping me, which if you help me, I can help you. So putting it in those kinds of terms can help. Another tactic that we've seen go over pretty well is to make your requests in person. So let's just say I'm on site for some training, or I've taken my client, to Jim's point, take my client out to dinner. At the around that time, say, hey, can you give me a review? Like I'm sitting here with you right now. Can you at least start this review? Maybe you can finish it later. But making that request in person adds some social pressure, some social juice to the request, which I think then helps to move that person along. So, if it's an email or a postcard, it's easy enough to just set that aside or hit the delete button. But when the request is made in person, there's that social pressure to make it happen right then and there. So, that's just a little bit behind the social psychology behind giving reviews and getting reviews.
So I have to say really quickly that I love that idea, quality over quantity. That's what Jim was saying earlier too. And mm-hmm. I think, and I see that in things like influencer marketing too, where it's like quality over quantity. You want to build those relationships, and that really great piece of feedback is going to be so much more valuable than somebody who's sort of hardly in it and maybe won't be quite it will be a better experience than what would have happened if you would just sort of send out an email blast or something and be requesting these things. Jason, could
I make a comment relative to this quality issue?
You bet.
One of the things that Michelle and I have discovered is that obviously you want to monitor as a marketer what customers are saying, and you want to respond to it, and you want to get your best customers to participate. One of the other key things that we found is that the thing that customers are looking for, purchasing managers are looking for, is they're looking for knowledge. They want clarification. And what we find is that case studies are more useful than testimonials. And what's the difference? In a testimonial, and you see these on TV and on websites a lot, someone comes in and says, yeah, they're a great company. They make great products. We love them. And most people assume that testimonials are basically rigged. A case study is it is the customer, but they're talking about a problem that they had and how the supplier solved it. Now, I know that these have been set up, but if the purchasing manager or the customer learns something, they're more likely to believe it. So whether it's an online review or something on your website, you want to encourage your customers to provide case studies where there's just a little bit of detail. Here's my problem. Here's how they solved it. And this is how I'm better off. That's going to be the most effective thing you can do relative to marketing.
That is such a great point, because that actually, I was going to go in one direction and now I'm going to go into a different one, because we were talking about how there is so much value in these online communities where people are getting the feedback from other people who have had those experiences. But you mentioned how case studies are better than testimonials. And the reason why, And with testimonials, yes, you doubt how valid they are. For your internal scorecards, you're doubting, is there cronyism? Is there the Maverick? What's it called? I love that. Maverick spend.
Maverick spend.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so if that's going on, but with online communities, it's not always the perfect situation either. And I want to explore that too, because I've been in some of these online communities where people ask they ask the question about a certain vendor, and it will happen one day, and then the next week it'll happen again, and then the next week it happens again. And what are some of the problems with this? Because you want the feedback from your community. But I mean, for example, if I post my feedback about a particular vendor, I'm not going to copy and paste it. I'm not going to keep responding to the same thing. So could you maybe speak to that a little bit? I mean, I think that what I'm looking for is, looking at the online communities, but also looking at, maybe why these review sites are good for compiling them.
Well, it's curious because there are far more listeners in online communities than there are participants, right? Because people that are listening for any possible new trends or new technologies or new incentives. And these purchasing professionals are very leery of showing their hand, right? Because their competition may be in that same room. So there's far more listeners than talkers in many of these online communities. So how to initiate real dialogue. Early on in our research, Jim and I talked with a facilitator of the LinkedIn forums that train the trainer to how to stimulate more rich conversation. And part of that is by the host, the community host, of how do you ask different questions? How do you continue to keep it interesting and lively? And I think most important, useful. Because if it's not useful, people just delete, and they only go to it when they have a problem potentially. And so then they either are looking through archived information if there's a good search feature, or they're just asking the question again, and perhaps someone answered it 6 months ago and they're willing to respond again, but it's more likely than not that they're not going to take that type of time and effort.
Yeah. And any online, by the way, anyone who's watching this that is an online community moderator or has some kind of control over the way that these things are set up, think about this, because some of the search features in some of the power behind this search feature in some of the online communities, not so great. So you might want to try to figure out a better way to get people the information that they're looking for. I am this incentives question is being brought up again over in the chat area. So yes, Jason, we're going to actually talk about that a little bit. Terry saying, yes, they want to hear what you both have to say, Michelle and Jim, about incentives. Can you speak about incentives a little bit?
I think Ben was spot on when he suggested, Jason, better to get them without the incentives. For us, in terms of our surveys and our experiments and the interviews, all the asks that we had originally, we looked to incentivize the purchasing professionals to participate, and quickly found out that was a no-go, that many of their companies had policies that would not allow them to accept any incentives. We tried alternate routes of, drawings for their favorite charity, and that was all right. But I think given the nature of these professionals and business to business decision making, they are, there's so many credentialed educational opportunities for them. They're so active in their trade associations that I think if I were looking to stimulate reviews, I might be more likely to offer to host their next monthly Institute for Supply Management meeting, or to host their next trade association meeting and bring in a demo of a new product, to offer them something real that speaks to their professional integrity, because they're not like us. I might, as a consumer, do a lot for a chance at a $50 Amazon gift card, right? But in my professional identity, that often doesn't ring true to what stimulates people to take time and effort to share their knowledge with other professionals. So I would look for more things that speak to that professional identity that these lifelong learners and truth seekers the purchasing professionals are aligned with.
One of the things I would add is that there's actually a lot of controversy about this. There's one of the top social media agencies is a group called Mechanism, and they operate largely in the B2C area, and they do viral marketing or buzz marketing. And basically the way that works is that they identify the thought leaders for a given product category or some expert, and they get them to chat it up online. Now, the thing that's distinctive about Mechanism is that they pay these people. And their argument is that as long as you state in advance, up front, these are paid spokespeople, it's okay. So, for example, when I watch TV and I see some celebrity or actor giving a commercial, I realize that they have been paid. So, again, the bottom line on this is that obviously non-paid, non-incentivized things are better. But if I got to pay people, I need to be upfront with the customer that, hey, these are paid endorsers of our product.
Right.
So I've got some follow-up thoughts on this. So the first one is that, when we're talking about purchasing professionals and the types that Jim and Michelle have been studying, these are folks who are making 50, 100, 200, 500 purchasing decisions per year. Clearly, they are holding the purse strings to an organization, and they may be spending millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars per year. So any incentive, just the mere mention of incentive to these people probably raises red flags in their issues, in their mind, because, to Jim's point, this cronyism, like this will get them fired in an instant. If you take an incentive to give a review, that could be grounds for dismissal. So, I think especially from a professional B2B procurement professional, they may look at an incentivized review and just discount it entirely, because it raises so many red flags for them. And maybe I'll let Jim and Michelle comment on that in a second after I do my second point, which is if you have been incentivized to write a review, you're actually obligated by the commission to disclose that you have been given an incentive. You can actually be fined and maybe even imprisoned, I'm not sure. But if you do not disclose that you've received an incentive to give the review, you actually have some legal liability, and you may find a Federal Trade Commission inspector hunting you down. So, if you're giving a review and you've taken an incentive, please be sure to disclose that. As a vendor, if you're thinking about incentivizing your customers to give a review, you may want to think twice about it. But if you do go that route, and again, the reviewer discloses it, just be aware that you want to encourage and maybe even require, if you can, your customer to disclose that, but also just be careful about the types of incentives that you're offering. Above all, make sure that they're disclosing that. But I'd be curious to hear from Jim and Michelle, those professional procurement professionals, like when they see incentives, does that really raise a red flag for them in their minds?
I think you're right on with both comments, Ben. And to me, there's one thing, everything we're talking about with reviews is how to share the knowledge of a supplier's solution and cut through the clutter of being bombarded with different digital tools and constant information. And there's one thing that cuts through constant clutter better than anything else. And that's a real solution that solves the company's real problems and stating that in real terms that communicate effectively to the purchasing professional. I don't know that incentives or reviews or any of the like do that better than a company performing. Everybody wants to talk about a great, outstanding, above average experience. And most companies are not looking to excel in extraordinary ways. Instead, they're looking to how to communicate their kind of average experience. And so purchasing professionals are so discerning that the strategic importance of their profession over the last 20 years has elevated them in a position where they're trusted servants of the company that are given the task of finding the best fitting solution. So incentives don't hit that mark. They certainly raise the red flags. The FTC's proposal that not only is it in financial incentives, but in kind incentives. It's just changed the flavor of, what purchasing professionals may begin to think about when they're looking at a host of communication from suppliers. So I think you're right on with both those points.
So, Jim, did you have anything to add, or are we good?
No, I think, honesty is the best policy. Getting someone to say something non-incentivized is obviously a better solution. But if you do resort to some sort of incentive, then you need to specify that and state that in advance. Now, one of the other things that Michelle and I have found in our research relative to these online reviews is that most of the respondents that we've talked to don't make the final decision based on online reviews. So it's, the reviews are a point of clarification. And as a matter of fact, we find them to be most useful when it's time to create an approved vendor list or an approved product list. So I might narrow down all of my alternative vendors, my alternative products to 5 using online reviews. And then I go into depth doing other analyses to make the final decision. So in our experience, it's rare that someone would use a review to make the final decision. It's critical in creating that approved vendor list.
So that is actually a great segue into my next question, which is when we focus in on these online review sites. So I want to create an approved vendor list, or I want to narrow down and make sure that I'm receiving the best reviews possible to help me zone in and focus on the people I want to choose, or the organization's solution, product, whatever. How do I know that the review site I go to is quality? Because all review sites aren't created equal, I imagine. So what did you find in talking with, in both your research with talking with purchasers, but also just knowing this area? What have you found? But, I guess defines what a good versus a bad review site really is.
I would argue that a lot of the responsibility for this is up to the platform provider and or the organization that sets this in. So if you want to make your reviews believable, you have to basically spell out how did the reviewers get selected, where did they come from, what are their qualifications, what did we do to verify the fact that they're legitimate. And 2 aspects of this is that, number one, you have to prove that these people actually buy the product. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, the factor that turns out is how recently did they buy the product? Mm-hmm. In that if they bought it 5 years ago, I don't know I would put any faith in them whatsoever.
Right.
But providing that information, I think, is the responsibility of the platform provider or whoever it is that's setting up the review. The more that information they can provide, the greater believability. And the purchasing people would check that information before they pay attention to the reviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jim's right on about these characteristics that enhance believability. And then there's also the relevance piece. We found that in many cases, purchasing professionals were looking at what area, functional area, wrote the review. Was this engineering? Was this operations? Was this a fellow purchasing professional? To kind of understand the mindset of the reviewer as well. The company size, industry, those factors that give them a more rich flavor of the experience. Was this a first time purchase for the buyer? Were they experienced? Was this dual sourcing? So some characteristics, there's the believability piece of the review and the platform. And then there are also these characteristics of the buy itself that help them kind of understand the context by which this review is written.
So can I ask a follow-up question on that, Michelle? On your work has talked about the importance of anonymity for the person who's giving the review. Yeah. I wonder if you could opine a little bit on how do you balance this this desire for anonymity on behalf of the reviewer and the need for believability on the person who's reading the review.
It's really an important question, isn't it? Because we found that people purchasing professionals were uncomfortable, not so much with their name, right? We might as individuals go to Yelp and give a negative review to a restaurant I went to for lunch today, but in their professional capacity, with their name and functional area attached to a company, there was concern of legal liability. So anonymity became very important. But it goes back to what Jim said. They also wanted to understand that the platform had verified this was a real person in a real purchasing decision. Now, some of that, the authenticity comes through the language of the experience, the language of the review. So platforms that allow for that richness more than just, 3-star or 2 out of 5 sort of ratings that allow for that qualitative give some of that. But I think the signal and smell of legitimacy from the platform to the language to understand the characteristics of the buy become really important because anonymity is so important to the author of the review.
See, I would add once again, it all goes back to the platform provider or the site, in that if you're believable and I have trust in you, I will accept your statement that this is an anonymous review based on my thorough evaluation. So if I believe the platform, I have no problem with anonymity.
So on that, I love the idea that we are getting some good responses on, okay, so if we were to do incentives, what would they have to look like? And okay, we're not going to do incentives. Based on your research, based on what you know, if you were a company, if you were a business selling to a business, how would you go about, reaching out so that you could do the best that you could on online communities and for online review sites? Because, I feel like we do know that there are a lot of people who are watching on online communities who are kind of waiting, and they don't want to jump. If they don't want to jump on and scare people away, they're lurking in the shadows, and maybe they can glean some kind of information that they can use for their businesses or their, or you look at the online review sites, and surely there's something more that a company can do to improve their chances, improve their engagement with potential customers. So what's your advice on that?
I think first and foremost, outside of having an outstanding product or service, right, that can never be skimped on, but assuming an outstanding service or product, teach them something, right? Tell a potential user something they don't know about a new technology, a new practice, a new law, something that is relevant in the space and relevant to the supplier, such that the supplier shows their expertise and their relevance within that industry. Because community means something more than we just get together. Mm-hmm. And I think of all business professions, these purchasing professionals, they're learning across industry. They're learning through different suppliers, and the supplier that teaches them the most, it's relevant information to them versus just providing them with facts about their product that they could get online through their website, right? Or through other demonstrations of it, really has a chance to engage with that user group far more than other suppliers.
Ooh, I love that.
The point I would add, being a marketing guy, is targeting is important here. Now, before we went online, Kiki, you and I were talking about the fact that there are too many tools out there, and you suffer from overload. I think the one thing that you have to do as a marketer or salespeople or person is to find out what communities, what social media your customers, purchasing people, actually use on a regular basis, and target your efforts at those communities and those. And one of the things that Michelle and I have found is that it varies all over the lot. So there's no one size fits all here. In some industries, they use everything that's out there. So for example, if you go to the IT, healthcare, pharmaceutical industry, they're using all the digital tools. In other industries, for example, industrial chemicals, you're lucky if they use Google. So obviously you have to pick where you're going to devote your efforts to what it is that your purchasing people, your customers use to communicate. So again, that's, marketing 101 from my standpoint. Targeting is a key task here.
It is marketing 101, but I feel like it's some of those basic essential pieces of knowledge that so often are the ones that get glossed over. Know who your audience is, know who your customer is one that people want to kind of zoom past and just make a lot of assumptions about. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, reminds me of spring training in baseball. They spend the first couple of weeks going over the basic plays, like ball is hit to the pitcher, he throws it to the first baseman, and you got to go over that and over that and over that until you get it right, so that during the season you do it automatically. And it's the same thing here. You've got to know what the basics are. You got to practice the basics. You get them, ingrained so that you do them automatically. So there's no difference.
So here's a follow-up question that I wasn't expecting to ask. So on that, because you're looking at the way people with big purchasing power who make a lot of purchases throughout the year, how they make their decisions. But a lot of times the industries that they're in are changing so quickly. So when somebody's doing that evaluation, when a marketer's going through spring training for their business and they are trying to figure out, who is my customer, a lot of times now that's changing quite a bit, and where they go is changing. If somebody tunes in to a particular podcast, if somebody participates in a particular online community, that's not always going to be the same, right? Or am I wrong? I don't know. Tell me what you think.
It's all different today. That's why Michelle and I are doing this research, is to find out what the current state of the art is. And it's changing significantly. And, as I just mentioned, it varies so widely across industries that, again, you have to start by getting a good grip on who's doing what technologies they prefer. The other thing that we haven't really touched on to this point relative to online communities and knowledge and the like is that one of the things that we found is that increasingly the job of a purchasing manager is to keep track of technological developments. Mm-hmm. And the idea here is that, I'm not going to be buying this particular product or service for my company today, but maybe in 5 years, that new technology is going to take over the industry by storm. So a lot of times I go to these communities, I read reviews, not because I'm going to use that information today, but I want to be knowledgeable. So in 5 years, when that becomes the state-of-the-art technology, we're ready to act on it. So that's part of this as well, just keeping up on technology.
Well, I think alongside of that is the fact that those learning about those new dimensions allows buyers to have more depth conversations with their current suppliers, so that when they reach that 5-year mark of, hey, the new technology is readily available, they've already had conversations and are more prepared for what that technology may help them do.
Right. Oh my gosh, there's so much to think about with this. So as you were going through and doing this research and uncovering some of the many ways that people are making their buying decisions, that companies are making buying decisions, did you start to get a feel for what the future holds? Did you start to get a feel for maybe the trajectory that we're on in the way that these buying decisions are being made? If I gave you a crystal ball and I said, okay, Michelle, Jim, Ben, you can weigh in on this too, like where you feel the future is with the way people are making buying decisions for businesses. What would you say?
I would jump in immediately by saying go to China, because they are doing it today. As a matter of fact, one of Michelle's favorite little anecdotes about one of her friends in China is that, you could take your cell phone, any little village in China, and buy anything without having cash.
Wow.
So, I would say that we're moving in that direction. And, if you wanted a crystal ball, I would take a look at China and see what they're doing, because that's, I think, where we're going to end up. And again, this doubles back to this online review thing, in that they're crazy about online reviews in China. And I think we need to catch up if we want to do business with them and or improve the way we do business.
Well, I think Jim's right on in that China shows two dimensions that are critical for our success anywhere in the globe. And that is a deeply rich understanding of the relational aspect, but also the ability to scour pretty fast, yet pretty deep, all of the information that's available to make sure they're not missing anything. Mm-hmm. This is like being able to channel surf really well, but at the same time, lock and load in more depth material when that becomes relevant for the purchasing professional.
So I think I have a follow-up question to this, which is, Kiki and I both come from the nonprofit association management profession. And you guys have already alluded to the fact that many purchasing professionals go to their associations when they want to make a purchasing decision, or they want to learn about a company that they're thinking about acquiring a product or. You may not have an answer to this question, but I'm just kind of curious to hear from you guys who have done the research. Do you have any recommendations for associations who their members to make the best possible buying decisions? Like, are there any actionable steps that an association could take to provide their members with better products, services, or whatever to help them make better buying decisions? What do you like? Should they encourage those kinds of conversations in their online communities? Any advice?
The way I would start off here goes back to one of Kiki's initial questions, is what surprised you? And one of the things that we found that totally surprised us is the importance of associations, associations and trade conferences held by those associations. And one of the things that we found in asking about what tools you use is that purchasing professionals are very dependent on their associations for basic market information. How many people are out there, who's buying what, and more important, the technology. So if I want to know what technology is widely used in my association or my industry, I tend to go to my association. So from my standpoint, our research indicates that trade associations are actually becoming more important, not less important. Now, a lot of the context is going to be digital rather than face-to-face, but that's one of the first places that you start is with an association.
Well, I think I completely agree. One of the challenges for associations is figuring out how to offer a hybrid of experiences from online all the way to the rich face-to-face that could be filled with demo and conversation and rich interactions, and not to just assume, well, millennials don't want to go interact in person. That's not the case at all. They just need to make it worth their time. And so not to try to replicate information online and in person, but find ways to continue to offer the information that hits their needs, which is learning constantly about new information that they can use to help their companies achieve their goals.
So I have kind of an odd question, and then I'll wrap everything up, because I know I said that it would probably be under an hour, but this is good. Okay, so if somebody's watching this and they wanted to fast track their understanding of how they could better market their product business to business or what have you, they just wanted to understand and get a handle on where things are going. China has been brought up over and over again, talking about the way that people are buying. If you were to advise me on how what a trip like that would look like, if I wanted to teach myself, we've talked about lifelong learning before we got on this call too, and if I were to take this upon myself, or somebody who's watching this or listening to this later wanted to learn more and fast track to success, where would I go? I'm saying let's go to China. How long should I stay? And maybe what are the top 1 to 3 questions I should ask while I'm there?
I would say the place to start, combining the last two questions is to go to your sister association in China and just tell them, here's what I want to know, and have them set it up. So for example, Michelle and I have dealt with the counterpart of the what's called the Institute for Supply Management, which is like the premier purchasing management association here in the US. We go over to their counterpart in China, and they'll be more than happy to help you out. I think one of the things about the Chinese is that they're in a very optimistic growth mode, and they want to demonstrate to the rest of the world that they are on the cusp of the next breakthrough technologies. So I don't think you'll have any problem talking to the companies there. I would start with my association, find out what their counterpart is there, make an introduction, and have them put me in contact with the enterprises there that are state of the art.
Well, and because you're dealing with such a relational country, there's so many opportunities, from the trade associations to even sister cities within, so Winston-Salem has a sister city in China, to supplier, whether it's second or third tier suppliers in China. You deal with a highly relational country that would like to showcase their successes, and there's so much to learn. As for how long to stay, a long time, right? Multiple visits. This isn't something, you got to go and do what sort of time you have. I have known from my trips to China that I could spend 10 years there and only scratch the surface. Wow. So it's a very rich and wonderful space.
One of the things I would point out, we've been doing research on sites in China. And in China, there are something like 5 government sites that will help you as an outsider find a supplier in China.
Wow.
So if you say, I want to buy a widget, they'll help you find those suppliers. So you can go to these government websites and you can track down companies that are going back to the online communities. I can find peer companies there and find out what they're doing. And again, it saddens me that we don't have the same thing in the United States. If someone wanted to buy an American-made product, you basically have to figure it out yourself. Whereas the Chinese government is bending over backwards to help you find suppliers there that fit your needs.
I have learned so much on today's chat, and I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show today. So I see Ben. Ben, what is it?
Yeah. Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to give Jim and Michelle the opportunity to talk a little bit about how our listeners can keep up to date with their research and new stuff that they're putting out there. So
that's what I was about to say. But yes, okay.
Read your mind.
Ben, you're covering it. Yes.
Yeah. So Jim and I host a site that's just our research findings. We have some fast facts, some lecture series, you name it, on engagementb2b.com. It's a site that allows us to share pretty quickly any of the findings from our experiments in our surveys. And anyone interested in knowing more about that can explore it.
We've posted all of our articles and books. So, previously you asked, where can I find some of this information? So that's available. And Michelle and I would be happy to, tell any of these managers, what the key trends are and who's doing what and where to go to find information. That's part of our job, is to be knowledge merchants, so to speak. So we'd be happy to talk to any of your viewers.
I love it.
And of course, Jim and Michelle are both members of the Review Society.
Yeah.
So at reviewsociety.org, you could go over to reviewsociety.org and actually engage in a conversation with you guys if you have any further questions. And, I guess the one thing I'd like to point out, Kiki, is that hosts this monthly review chat. And, Kiki is the hostess with the mostest.
And yes,
our Chief Marketing Officer.
Yeah, I officially got my cards today. So yes, this is
fantastic.
Yes, I can officially.
Thank you both for the chance to talk with you about a topic. It's special to have people who are into this with us too, and thinking about what are the impacts. How can you help people, achieve greater performance?
Well, I would also add that this whole area is exciting and it's unfolding now, and it's not clear where it's going. So I think it's good to be in on the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, Kiki, my closing thought would be, before I let you take us home, is that February 8th is our next review chat. Yes. We've lined up our next host. His name is Gavin Mullen, and Gavin runs a company called Euro.com. His company specializes in helping organizations get reviews right within the shop or right within the store or right within the office. It's kind of this concept of being able to get your reviews face-to-face. And we'll be talking a lot about the social psychology behind getting reviews, B2C, but also the B2B perspective. So that's February 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern with Gavin Mullins of Euro.
Is he the host or the guest? I'm so
He's
curious.
The guest.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Did I say host?
Yes.
I didn't mean it.
I was like, wow, that's cool. Okay, so thank you all for listening and joining us for this episode of Review Chat, your only live show and podcast dedicated solely to the art and science of online reviews. You can always catch new episodes of the chat on the second Thursday of every month. And please check out the Review Society online for more information. And if you have show ideas or questions for our guests, you can contact me through Twitter. You can contact them at the ways that they told you just a moment ago, or you can contact me through LinkedIn. And thanks for listening. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous week.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.